The announcement echoed through the high-ceilinged hall, muffled by the shuffle of boots on polished tile and the low hum of hurried conversations. The airport smelled faintly of coffee and cold metal. She stood near gate 14, shoulders drawn in as if bracing against a wind that didn't exist. In her hands that trembled, though she kept trying to still them, was a small brown suitcase with a crooked zipper. Balanced on top was a red scarf, the fabric frayed at the ends like something that had been clutched too tightly for too long. Her gaze drifted past the moving crowd to the glass wall beyond, where snow began to fall in hesitant flakes. Each one hit the window, melted instantly, and disappeared. A man in a gray coat brushed past her, muttering an apology. She didn't answer. Her eyes had caught on something, a woman laughing too loud into her phone, a suitcase rolling behind her like it belonged to someone richer, freer, untethered. The scarf slipped, sliding down toward the floor. She caught it before it touched the ground, her fingers tightening around it until her knuckles paled. A burden, the word pulsed in her memory, sharp as broken glass. She hadn't asked for it to echo now, but it did. The line at the boarding gate began to move. People hugged goodbye, quick squeezes, lingering touches, whispered promises. She didn't move toward it. She stayed rooted, watching the way their hands lingered on each other's shoulders. Somewhere in her coat pocket, her phone buzzed once. She didn't check it. She knew what it would say, nothing she wanted to hear. Her reflection in the glass startled her. The tired curve of her mouth. The way her eyes seemed to hold their own weather, darker than the snow outside. For a second, she thought about leaving, just turning away and walking out into the cold. But she stayed. A child nearby dropped a toy train, the clatter sharp against the floor. The sound made her chest tighten, though she didn't know why. Someone called her name from behind, soft, tentative. She didn't turn right away. Her fingers smoothed the scarf, tracing the tiny tear along its seam, as if the motion alone could stitch something whole again. When she finally looked, the person was closer than she expected. Her voice was quiet, almost swallowed by the crowd. "You're here." The reply came slower, weighted. "Yeah. I am." The boarding gate beeped for the final call. She took one step forward, then stopped. Outside, the snow was falling harder. Inside, her grip on the scarf tightened until her hand ached. She wasn't ready to move. Not yet. The scarf's threads felt rough against her palm, catching on the ridges of her skin. She hadn't meant to bring it today, it had fallen into her suitcase almost by accident, but now it seemed impossible to let go. It smelled faintly of cedar and detergent, the same way it had when her father had wrapped it around her neck on her first day at college. "Keep it close. You'll need warmth more than pride," he'd said, eyes crinkling in that way that made him look older than he was. She hadn't understood then what he meant. Now, years later, the words pressed in like the cold through thin gloves. The crowd kept shifting around her. A young man in a leather jacket ran to meet someone at the gate, his arms flung wide. They collided in laughter and warmth. She turned away quickly, afraid the tightness in her throat would show. Her suitcase leaned against her leg, heavier than it should have been. Not with clothes, most of her life was too small to weigh much, but with the sense that she was always carrying more than she could put down. Rent notices folded at the bottom. An unopened letter from the bank. Receipts she'd stopped adding up because the math never worked. The stranger, tall, early 30s maybe, stood a few feet away. His hands were buried in his coat pockets, but his eyes were steady on her. Not curious in the way strangers usually are. More, watchful. She felt it but didn't acknowledge it, afraid that if she met his gaze, something might unravel. Another boarding call echoed. Passengers shifted forward, the line shortening. She stayed where she was. The scarf slipped again, and she caught it before it fell. Her thumb found the tear in the seam, rubbing over it again and again. That tiny imperfection had been there for years, and she'd never fixed it. Maybe she liked the flaw, it felt honest. A memory pressed through. She was 12, sitting cross-legged on her bed, trying to stitch a button back onto her shirt. Her mother had leaned in the doorway, saying, "No one notices what's broken if you keep smiling." She'd smiled then, but the button had never been straight. The stranger moved slightly closer. His steps were slow, deliberate, as though he knew rushing might scare her. She felt the weight of his presence now, the way it seemed to fill the space between them without touching. "Are you boarding?" he asked finally, his voice low enough to be drowned by the gate announcements. Her eyes flicked to the gate, then back to him. "I don't know." For a heartbeat, they stood in the narrow silence between the crowd's movements. He gave the smallest of smiles, not joy, not pity. Just something unreadable. Her feet shifted toward the line. Then stopped. The scarf tightened in her fist. The snow outside had turned heavier, blurring the runway lights into soft halos. Each flake hit the glass and vanished, like moments too fragile to keep. Inside, the air felt warmer, almost too close. He stepped nearer, close enough now that she could see the scuffed leather of his shoes, creases deep, soles fraying at the edges. Shoes that had walked through more than one winter. "You'll miss your flight," he said, though his voice carried no urgency. She glanced at the line, short now, almost gone, and then back to him. "Maybe that's not the worst thing." He tilted his head, studying her as if weighing something unspoken. A corner of his wallet peeked from his coat pocket, worn soft with time. For a moment, when he shifted, a photograph flashed. A boy and a woman standing in front of an old farmhouse, their smile small but real. He slid the wallet back in without noticing she'd seen. It wasn't pity she felt. It was recognition. That quiet, familiar ache of having more past than future planned. Thunder rolled faintly above, muffled by the airport roof. The storm wasn't supposed to come until tomorrow, but storms rarely waited for permission. "You're traveling alone," he said, not as a question, but as a fact. She tightened her grip on the scarf. "So are you." Something flickered in his expression. The kind of flicker people get when they've been seen unexpectedly. Passengers hurried past them toward another gate, voices layered with goodbyes and promises. A little girl skipped by holding her father's hand, and the sight made her stomach twist, not from envy, but from the memory of what it was like to feel safe without trying. Her suitcase felt heavier again, though she hadn't moved it. She thought about stepping away, disappearing into the crowd, letting this conversation dissolve like the snow outside. But something in him, the stillness, the watchfulness, kept her in place. He broke the silence. "You ever feel like you're running towards something, but it's really running away?" Her throat tightened. "Every day." The thunder came again, closer this time. The lights flickered briefly overhead, and the sound of rain began tapping against the roof. She should board. That's what logic said. That's what her bank account said. That's what every careful plan she'd made said. But logic didn't explain why her feet stayed still. He shifted his weight, eyes scanning her face like he was trying to memorize it. Somewhere in the terminal, a final call echoed, not for her flight, but another. It startled her all the same. She took one step toward him. Then stopped. The scarf dangled from her hand, brushing the floor. Neither of them spoke. And the rain kept falling. The terminal lights had taken on a colder hue, the way they did late in the day when even the air seemed tired. She shifted her suitcase, her pulse quickening as the boarding sign for her gate flashed red, "Final call." It was her chance to leave, to step into the safe, predictable path she'd mapped out. Her knees almost bent toward the line. Almost. But she glanced back, just for a second, expecting him to be gone. He wasn't. He was standing there, hands in his pockets, as if he'd been carved into the moment. Something in her chest loosened and then pulled tight again. She told herself to walk away. She even turned her body toward the gate, but the sound of fabric brushing the floor stopped her. The scarf. It wasn't in her hand anymore. It was in his. He held it lightly, almost respectfully, the frayed edges spilling over his fingers. "You dropped this," he said, voice low but carrying. Her breath caught, not because she had dropped it, but because he had picked it up like it was something rare. "Some people carry more than just bags," he added, his eyes steady on hers. "They carry silence." Her fingers itched to take it back, but her feet didn't move. A woman at the vending machine shot them a glance, quick, assessing. The kind of look that said she'd already written the story in her head. Two strangers, some unspoken drama, probably messy. A man passing with a coffee muttered, "You boarding or not?" She didn't answer. The scarf swayed slightly in his hand as if it might fall again, as if the choice to take it back was hers alone. Her throat tightened. "Why do you care?" she asked, though the words came out softer than she meant. He hesitated, gaze flicking to the snow-streaked glass beyond them. "Because I know what it's like to leave with nothing you want to take, and nothing you can leave behind." The gate beeped, the kind of sound that meant they were minutes from closing it. A flight attendant glanced toward her, expectant but already half turned away. Her feet moved, one step toward the gate, then another toward him. Back and forth inside her mind like the swing of a clock's pendulum, marking seconds she couldn't afford to waste. She reached for the scarf. Their fingers touched, briefly, like the pause between inhale and exhale. And then she pulled it back to her chest. Neither spoke. The boarding door hissed shut behind her, sealing its choice without her in it. She stood there, scarf pressed to her heart, rain drumming harder overhead. Between them, the air felt like it might break. The rain hammered harder against the glass, muting the terminal's noise into something almost private. She still held the scarf close, as if it might stop her from unraveling. He shifted his weight, glancing toward a nearby seating area. "We should sit," he said, not as an invitation but as if it were inevitable. She followed without meaning to. The chairs were cold, metal pressing into her back. He set his own battered briefcase on the seat beside him. When he opened it to take out a notebook, a photograph slipped free, this time not of a boy and woman, but of a little girl with hair the same deep brown as hers. She was wearing the scarf. Whole, unfrayed. Her stomach turned. "That's yours?" she asked, nodding toward the photo. His hand hovered over it, a pause too long to be casual. "Was," he said finally. "She used to wear it every winter. Said it made her feel seen in a crowd." The scarf felt heavier in her hands now. She almost asked what happened, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she heard her own voice from earlier, "Why do you care?" looping back at her like an echo she couldn't step away from. "Some people carry more than just bags," he murmured again, softer this time, his gaze not on her but on the rain. "They carry silence, and sometimes it's too much." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. She already knew the sender, the company she'd applied to 3 weeks ago, the one she'd been counting on to turn things around. Only she didn't expect what came next. He reached for his wallet, sliding out a business card and placing it on the armrest between them. Her heart stuttered. The logo was unmistakable, the same as the email header she'd memorized from the job posting. "You work there?" she asked slowly. "I own it," he said, like it wasn't a confession but a fact that had always been true. Something inside her shifted. The safe, polite distance she'd been holding cracked under the weight of this new truth. Her mind raced. This wasn't just a stranger at an airport. This was someone who could change the shape of her future, for better or worse. The scarf slid in her grip, the frayed threads winding between her fingers like a choice she couldn't undo. She realized, with a sudden, dizzy certainty, that she couldn't go back to the person she'd been before this moment. When he stood, she followed without hesitation, the briefcase clicking shut. They walked down a narrow hall toward a small glass-walled lounge. The door clicked open. She stepped inside. And knew nothing would be the same. The lounge was quieter than the terminal outside, the sound of rain reduced to a soft, steady whisper against the glass. A coffee machine hummed in the corner. The light here was warmer, golden, like the hour before sunset. She stood just inside the doorway, her suitcase beside her, scarf still in her hands. He didn't sit. Instead, he moved to the window, looking out at the darkened runway as if it could answer something. She waited, unsure if she'd been brought here for an offer, a warning, or something in between. When he finally turned, his expression was unreadable. "I've been watching you since the check-in desk," he said plainly. "Not because I knew you, but because you reminded me of someone I lost." His eyes flicked to the scarf. "She wore that on the day I saw her last. She was my daughter." The breath caught in her chest. She looked down at the scarf, tracing the frayed threads with her thumb, feeling the weight of years she hadn't lived. "She died in an accident," he continued. "Since then, I've kept it. I didn't mean to carry it with me today. I thought I'd left it in storage. But seeing it in your hands," he let the sentence fade. Her mind tangled in the impossibility, how it had come into her life, how she'd treated it as her own. He stepped closer. "You applied for a position at my company." She nodded. "You're qualified," he said. "More than most. But I won't hire you because of this. I'll hire you because I can see you're the kind of person who knows the weight of what she carries." It should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like something breaking open. She thought of her father's words, "Keep it close. You'll need warmth more than pride." And suddenly she understood. This scarf wasn't hers to keep. Slowly, she folded it, the fabric soft from years of use. She placed it in his hands. "I can't take this into the next part of my life," she said. "It's not mine to carry anymore." He didn't speak right away. When he did, it was barely above a whisper. "Thank you." She turned toward the door, her suitcase rolling softly behind her. At the threshold, she paused. The rain had slowed, the runway lights clearer now, their halos smaller, sharper. The image from the airport earlier flashed in her mind, her standing still, watching others leave. But now she was the one walking away, not hesitating. She didn't look back, but she felt his gaze on her, the quiet weight of it. Outside, the crowd moved as it always had, oblivious to the shift inside her. She didn't have the scarf anymore. What she carried now was invisible. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. And not every stranger you help is meant to stay, but some leave you changed forever. The city was quieter than she remembered. Rainwater still clung to the edges of the sidewalks, catching the glow of street lamps in small, trembling pools. She walked without hurry, suitcase rolling lightly behind her. Each step felt different, not lighter, not heavier, just steadier, as if her feet knew where they were going even if she didn't. At her apartment, she set the suitcase by the door but didn't unpack. Instead, she went to the small wooden drawer by her bed, the one where she kept things she couldn't throw away but couldn't look at every day either. It was empty except for a folded train ticket from years ago and a photograph of her father laughing in the kitchen. She touched the photo once, then let her hand rest on the wood. The scarf wasn't there, it never would be again, but she could still feel its texture in her fingers, the way it had warmed her neck in crowded places. She thought of his words in the lounge, the way they had settled into her chest. Some people carry more than just bags, they carry silence. She smiled faintly, almost to herself. Silence wasn't so heavy now. The memory of her father's voice surfaced, different words this time, ones she'd forgotten until this moment. Sometimes love is not romance, it's recognition. She understood now. What she and the stranger had shared was not about staying, not about promises, but about seeing each other clearly in a world full of passing glances. She closed the drawer gently and went to the window. The rain had stopped completely. In its place was a soft, silver mist that blurred the streetlights. A couple walked below, hand in hand, their laughter spilling into the air like something too pure to catch. She didn't feel envy. She didn't feel loss. Just the quiet certainty that she had left a piece of herself behind, not in surrender, but in exchange for something she couldn't yet name. A bus rumbled past. Somewhere, a door slammed. Life was still moving. She stepped away from the window, switched off the light, and let the darkness settle. It wasn't the kind of ending she could explain. Maybe it wasn't an ending at all. Because sometimes, the people you meet at the in-between places, the gates, the terminals, the rain-slick streets, are not meant to walk beside you forever. They are meant to hand you something invisible, and take something equally unseen in return. And the rest is yours to carry.